2024 on January 21st. I'd also like to welcome members of the Common Council, ladies and gentlemen of the public, and also of the press. What I'd like to say first is that the budget that's going to be presented will be presented by Mr. Longo to the Board of Education. We will entertain after the presentation. We will entertain questions from board members to Mr. Longo. Then after that, we'll open it up to the public. The budget that you're about to see is one that took an enormous amount of time to put together. I'm only on board for a couple of years. I would venture to say that this budget is probably the most difficult in probably the last 10 or 15 years to have come up with. It's put together with a tremendous amount of thought, with a lot of passion, compassion as to what had to be done, with the sole objective of principally providing a quality education to the children of the city of Danbury. We also took a lead from Mayor Bowden, who's often said that these are difficult times, and the only way we're going to get through this is working together. And we feel what we've done here is to try to accomplish that objective. So, with that being said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Ginelli. I'm going to start, and then we'll go into it with Elio. Thank you again for coming. Does everybody have a handout? I think we've gone through what you have. 2 sheets of paper. Okay. This is, as it says, a proposed budget to the board. It's ultimately the board's decision in terms of the direction you'd like to go. We've had a few meetings where we built some scenarios about where we might go. All of them didn't work. You know, we had the early retirement incentive, which was they highlighted. Last Friday was the due date, and with that, from there, we made some decisions that impacted the budget. So we've been updating this right up to about an hour ago, actually. So why don't we open up with the first slide? I think when the board makes a decision, really to focus on what we kept coming back to, what is really our core mission about what we're trying to do. And we did use this in looking at that lens at the reductions in the overall budget that we've had to make in the district. With the next slide, we made some assumptions. Now we made those assumptions.
We can barely hear you back.
Okay, thank you. Let me take the mic. Have a mic on. Thank you. Along with making sure that at our center that we try to keep moving forward, we have a mission that guided us through this process. Then we made some assumptions, and these may not be the best. Things will change. You know, the governor mentioned today they assumed a $620 million deficit this year. Now it's up to 920 million.
Close to that, low 900.
So it changes. So here are some assumptions we made: that the city could stand to lose $3 to $4 million in their ECS funds, and that can change. City to close the ECS loss for a zero budget increase. The assumption there is that it will not be passed through to the school system. The next thing is that the $112 million budget, which is this year, is flat funded, which is a 0% increase. So if we reduce at other levels, including grant amounts, we then reevaluate all the vacant and retired positions that we have. Then we're assuming that we will restore a 3% budget to the $112 million budget, which it gives us for next year as we work through here, $3.3 million more. The priority school grant will be continued at the current funding level of $2.3 million. My worry here, and I think I've mentioned it to the board, when the governor gives our budget on February 2nd, we don't know if she'll be reducing money from the ECS on top, or if she decides to recommend that the grants to the cities, and it would be mainly the cities, would be reduced further. Just so you know, that $2.3 million represents about 33 positions for us. So in the budget does not reflect the cut in that area. we combine and reallocate all resources wherever we can do it, wherever possible. And we work hard at that. Some other guiding principles is try to maintain the instructional integrity of each classroom, maintain the comprehensiveness of a high school, and keep a parity between the two middle schools. Maintain the current full-day model that we have for kindergarten. Keep the historical staffing patterns that we've had for K-5. And we've talked, and so you know, about trying to increase numbers at the K-1 level to the maximum amount. What we talked about in this budget on our reductions was to try to maintain those at about 20 students at the K level in first grade and not increase those to higher levels because of our work that we have to do with literacy in the early grades, so that we maintain that. And we hope to keep that at that level and not overstaff those with students in those classrooms. So they'll be maintained at the current levels that we have for K-1, while youngsters are learning how to read, how to think, and how to write at K-1. The balanced literacy approach program to be continued. The STEM initiative that we have at the middle school, that's just a continue, because that, as you recall, that was a pilot that we'll be talking about in the next board meeting, but it is meant to go 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Currently we have 6th and 7th. We're going to have it at 8th grade because of the enrollments that we have over at Broadview to maintain the program. So we have to keep that in the program. It's one of the principles in the program. The professional development program for building capacity of our staff needs to stay. The technology infrastructure that we put money into last year, we want to maintain that and upgrade that where we need to. And the co-curricular programs, which are all clubs, sports, bands, and theater, I'm recommending that they remain in the budget for purposes of this. Also, here, we don't have any real decision here not to have. We have to adhere to all state and federal mandates. We have special education, bilingual, and ESL that we have to staff at. And many of these things happen in the springtime as well. Before I turn it over to Mr. Elio, you'll look at 08, 09, you can see that we're $111 million or close to 112. Our operating increase moving forward, the contracts that we have negotiated, is at $6.4 million. Therefore, for 09 and 10, that would cost us basically 5.73% to do at $118 million and 118 in order to do that. If you look at 09 and 10, as I said before, to assume a 3% target, which was $3,560,000, you put that in there as new money over this year's allocation. The operating shortfall that we have moving forward is at $3 million. With those assumptions that we made in the beginning, moving the current salaries up, asking for 3% in this budget from the town, receiving that money, that's our shortfall. So the operating shortfall is $3 million. The technology fixed cost is $250,000. You may recall 2 years ago, one of the ways we balanced this year's budgets, we had 3 retirements in our curriculum coordinators. We need to restore that into our program. As you may recall, I meant when I said we would cut it out, I said we're going to have to replace that back into the program. We can't keep operating at the model we're at right now. So in order to do that, it'll cost us $370,000. The STEM of the 2 teachers at the 8th grade level is $140,000 with an operating shortfall of $3,008,000 going forward. So to do the things that we're talking about, to move forward, put those 3 things back in to $3.8 million. Next slide.
Good evening to your board members, members of the public, members of the Common Council. My apologies for at any time having my back to you. As Dr. Cascarella has expressed, going forward, our projected budget would require a 5.73% increase. Our target request of the city of Danbury is at 3%. We would like to, at this time, provide statistics on the success of our early retirement incentive plan. I believe many in the audience and our board members are aware of the criteria and the design of the plan by the Board of Education. It is the superintendent's objective to institute a replacement model of 90%. So we will not have one-for-one replacement as proposed by the superintendent and his cabinet. The statistics provide 71 participants at the close of business last Friday. The makeup of the 71 participants, 67 teachers and 4 Danbury district administrators. The average exit salary totals $111,054. The $111,000 is obviously skewed by the top administrator salaries. When one removes the top 4 administrator salaries and recalculates the average based on the median, which guides us always to the midpoint in salary, the adjusted exit salary is approximately $94,000. The total current exit salaries, 71 participant, total contribution in exit salaries is approximately $6.5 million. That number is not an estimate, it is an actual value assigned. Against the exiting $6.5 million, we estimate a replacement salary of $4,077,000, approximately $2.5 million of savings. As an incentive tied to the retirement plan, the district would have an obligation and responsibility for an annual total incentive cost of $932,000. The $932,000 is an actual number as calculated against the criteria to match whether our current employees, those who have applied for the early retirement incentive, qualify for 25% distribution, 50 or 75% distribution against their current salary. The $932,000 is an annual cost. It begins with year 1 next year and carries forward for years 2 through 5. As part of cost avoidance, having the current 71 members of the district continue with the district, possibly for the next 5 years. Against the cost avoidance, the City of Danbury and the Board of Education would incur the annual expenditure of $932,000. To recap, we have total excess salaries of $6.5 million, replacement cost of $4 million, and an annual incentive cost of $932,000, for an estimated gross savings of $1.5 million.
I think we're negligent to say that this is assuming the board accepts the EBRA. That has not been on your agenda. That is to happen next Wednesday for your consideration. So that's making another assumption.
Yes, thank you. Well, the estimated gross EBRA savings, $1.5 million. The Board of Education operates within its budget with a contra account. The contra account was made by the city many years ago. I've been with the Danbury school system now for 8 years. When I joined the Danbury system, the contra account was already in place. The contra account is a negative account for the board to realize savings intra-year. So technically, we begin each fiscal year with a shortfall. Current year is at $640,000. A couple of years ago, it was at well over $1 million. We propose for next year's built into the budget a $640,000 contra account. Simply put, the contra account is a way to keep the, and I hate to label it as such, I apologize, keep the board honest in terms of savings in normal attrition in a given year. We propose that the estimated year of savings of the $1.5 million to first address the contra account valued at $640,000. We apply $640,000 to the contra account, which then leaves a net savings from the ERA plan of approximately $900,000 credit.
Elio, that for the board's information, that amount of money is carried out from year 2 right along each year. So the contra account and the savings is about $1.5 million each year for 4 years.
That is correct. Yes. Thank you. With the projected operating shortfall, the $3.8 million, we now begin on our credits, cuts, and reductions district-wide. The first credit applied is the net value of the ERA plan. 90% replacement. It is a net of the $640,000 copper count allowance. And a 90% replacement, 7 less teaching positions, 10% of the 71 applicants. The 3.8 with a credit of $900,000, the revised shortfall of $2.9 million. Cuts, credits, and reductions across the district at the elementary school level. Superintendent's budget includes a proposal to eliminate at the elementary level math specialist positions. Total FTE, which is the full-time equivalency count, 9.0, non-classroom teachers. Total credit is $765,000.
Take a second now. The math specialist, you may recall last year we had our reading specialist. We eliminated them from the budget. So, and we still have one reading consultant that works with teachers at the elementary. We also have a math specialist that splits generally between 2 schools. But this, when it says non-classroom, it just means they don't have assigned regular students. They work in the classrooms and they work with teachers. This has taken us a long time. We weighed this against some other issues, particularly our full-day kindergarten aides against this. And we came down at this point in terms of the math specialist because of the decision we felt that the aides would assist us more with our literacy program. But up until this afternoon, we were still talking about this and the kindergarten aides. As I say this to the board to understand how difficult these decisions are. These are the math specialists. They do work with some kids. They work mainly with teachers and in model programs, and they've been very vital. So even though it's non-classroom teachers, they do work in classrooms. Thank you.
Continuing with the elementary level, teachers, classrooms, an additional 4.0 FTEs, credit $340,000. In total, under elementary level, teacher FTEs 13.0, total credit allowance of $1.1 million. 1.1 applied to the net value of 2.9 above, results in a revised shortfall of $1.8 million. Middle school and Danbury High School. At our middle school level, superintendent's budget includes the elimination of French instruction at our 2 middle schools. We continue with the world language, the Spanish only offered. 2 positions, credit $140,000. Tech Ed, 1 position at each of our 2 middle schools. 2.0 FTEs, credit $140,000, which results in a reduction in technology and education offered. Family and consumer science. In total, at the 2 middle schools, 4.0, which is an elimination of family consumer science at the middle school level. Credit $280,000. Reductions in the area of fine arts, 2.0 in total, credit of $140. And the reduction of 1.0 FTE at Rogers Park Middle School, the bilingual area of instruction, $70,000. Total teacher FTE impact at the middle school level, 11.0. Total credit, $770,000. Revised shortfall balance, $1,035,000. At Danbury High School, budget proposal includes the reduction of 9 FTEs in teacher workforce at the high school. Total credit allowance $765,000. Current deficit spending $270,000. Central office and district positions. Administrators, FTE equivalent 3.2. I'll turn to Dr. Pasquarella for a clear detailed explanation under 3.2. This again is tied back to the curriculum offering and the coordinators that were part of the district as FTE counts last fiscal year.
That's exactly right. 2 years ago, we reduced our curriculum coordinators. The reason why you don't see a money value there is simply we took the credit for it this year. To reinstitute it next year, we will have that expense in terms of that $370,000 to do it. But we would, if we had taken that credit this year, there's actually 3.2 less administrators on our staffing levels for administrators. So we're actually losing 3 people. You don't see a value there because we eliminated it this year. The cabinet, go ahead.
Cabinet, a transfer of 1.0 FTE cost away from the general fund to be covered by grant fund sources. Total value of $160,000 of relief to the general fund. Secretarial support at central office, a reduction of a half-time equivalent, $30,000. Total administrator/cabinet FTE, 4.2. Total non-certified FTE, a half of an FTE position. Cumulative value, $190,000 credit. Revised shortfall, $80,000. Educational Services Center, also known as the Osborne Street. We propose a reduction of a half-time FTE equivalent in secretarial support, $30,000. In the area of custodial support, every attempt will be made to minimize overtime spending in current and in future years. Total non-certified FTE at the Osborne Street location, 0.5 FTEs. Credit value $30,000. Revised spending $50,000. District support, we propose a reduction in the area of nursing staff by 1 FTE. Credit value $50,000. 1 FTE. Full-time equivalencies, FTE reductions. In summary, teachers classroom, 24.0. Math specialist teachers, 9.0. A 90% replacement model tied to the ERIP offer, the reduction of 7.0 teachers. Total of 40 educators, teachers. Non-certified staff, 2.0. Reduction to workforce, 42.0. The STEM program, at grade 8, there are 2 FTE costs assigned for a net reduction to the workforce of 40.0. Footnoted at the very bottom, the administrators, district, and cabinet, 4.2, which is a reduction in salary cost only.
Before we go to this last page, just know that 82% of our budget is made up of salaries and benefits. So we've taken going time and going through the other parts of the budget, and we've reduced it down. You know, we've had to add the 3 buses in order to accommodate this year's problems in transportation. That's part of our budget that we need. We looked at the utilities. We have a grant coming in which will save some money. So we've done a lot of the things in terms of before we got here. What you're hearing is the bulk of our cuts. So please understand we've spent time on that side, and we're still working with some of our groups in terms of some savings, and we're still looking at that. But the bulk of the money is coming from faculty and staff. When you saw the cuts at the elementary, middle school, very hard for us to do. You know, the middle school will have to move more towards a selective elective. Right now, we have a different program where everybody can make a selection. We'll be moving towards more of a selective elective. They'll have a language, they'll have an art, music experience, they'll have our technology going more STEM-based, computerized. They will not have the opportunity for the consumer ed, or the, family consumer science. We looked at that to get to where we needed to go. That's why we did that. These were hard decisions. It's something the youngsters can take up at the high school, is our thinking. So you can see how difficult this is for us, and I know for you as well. Other options that we looked at, athletics, co-curriculum. What would it, if we decided to do something there, it's roughly, and these are estimates, we'd have to, it's about $725,000 if we could do something with it. That's 1,000 to 1,400 students, and it varies. There's 1,200 spots we know on our athletic teams. There's about 1,000 different students that take advantage of those. Then we have our arts and our music programs, and drama, we have all of that in there. But, so that would range between, we figure, 1,000 to 1,400 students. It varies by year that it could impact. I consider that. I would not recommend it. In my view, it's co-curricular. It's part of the general education extension of what we do during the day for our youngsters. And it's almost half of our population at the high school. I think some years back, you all reduced or eliminated the program at the middle schools, I think. I would not recommend it, but we did consider it. Eliminating the kindergarten aides, I talked to you a little bit about that before. We have the math specialist, and we looked at this. If we were to reinstate the math specialist, it's $765,000. That means, and if we eliminated the kindergarten and put the math back, we'd have to go in and find 2 more positions, because every position is valued about $70,000. So we would have to find 2 more positions to make the difference. We looked in every other area, workman's comp, insurance, maintenance, supplies, everything. You know, it's really about people in terms of where we can recoup. So if we decide to go in another direction, here are some options for us. And like I said, we were on both sides of the equation. And we came down on keeping the kindergarten aides simply for the support of the youngsters at the kindergarten level. And that's why we made that decision. If we were able to furlough a day, you heard me say that maybe one of the solutions in this thing, they may reduce the number of days we have to come to school. I don't know. I sort of doubt it, because there's a lot of things that have to transpire, negotiations with unions. It's something that has to be legislated. But if we were able to furlough anything, it would save you, the district, $450,000 a day. That means we close down entirely. Nobody comes to school. At this point, if we were able to do it, that's the savings we've calculated. Reduced by 1 elementary. There was a possibility of doing that. The program was going to move, Head Start was to move out of one of our schools. We may have some room. We might be able to do some consolidating. If we could do that, you could look at a possible savings of $700,000 by closing the school. The other thing, which I don't think is a major money, but it could be more of a public relations kind of an issue, is not open all of our schools in the evening, and maybe have a few elementary, 1 middle, and the high school open up to the general public for rentals. You know, we can save some money that way, so we'll continue looking into that. I guess, Mr. Chairman, that's it. I want to thank everyone in the cabinet for working on this. This has been very difficult for us to do. You can see it gets us down to 0. But I want to say again, I caution you, any other cuts from the state can impact us much greater. We could be looking at more cuts if, in fact, the priority grant doesn't come to us. And if the ECS money is cut to the town where they don't give us the 3%, you have to understand, 3% will have to reduce a number of our teachers. I just don't know how we're going to operate. That's about a 5.2% reduction in our staff when you look at the total numbers. Let me ask the cabinet, do you have anything to add, Louis?
No, the only other thing is, you know, obviously the retirement incentive is key. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Obviously, the retirement incentive is key. We're able to achieve some of these savings because the people who are leaving voluntarily from the top end of the scale. If we were didn't have that, and we were looking at just pure layoffs, we'd be looking at more people because we'd be taking it from the bottom end of the scale. And the 5.2% number that Dr. Sal just mentioned it's 5.2% of the teaching staff is what we're looking at here. So there have been some numbers that have been floating around that aren't quite accurate. It was not 5.2% of everyone who works for the Danbury Public Schools. And I should also comment, I'm not sure if we brought it up, we looked at other areas for cuts as far as different bargaining groups, secretaries, nurses, that kind of thing, custodians. It's not possible, we don't think, to make a cut equal across all of the bargaining groups. We can't cut 5.2% of the custodians who are already operating on a thin margin. So just a lot of consideration went into specific positions and specific needs.
We're opening up another school. We need our new school. We have 1.5 at Roberts. They're looking at 2 at the new school. We're not going to be able to do that. And if we reduce, we consider reducing the custodian, but we know we're going to make it up in overtime. Didn't make a lot of sense to do that, so that's why you saw us freeze at that level. We're working with schedules with the nurse, and we think we can achieve that level right there. But other than that, we're open to suggestions and conversations with us. I think we have an awful difficult decision to make. It's just the start of the process, and we won't know where we're going with some more degree of clarity until February 2nd, when the governor gives us her budget. I'm just asking, Elio, anything else?
No, that's all.
Bob, do you have anything?
Yeah, just the only comment I would make is that we've worked very hard to do the best we can to minimize the impact of this significant cut. It's very painful, but we bring this over for your consideration.
I thank you very much. Thank you, Elio, for a great presentation. And also Lewis for the summation, for the additional information. As I said in the beginning, that the objective that we look to do here was to stay within the guidelines of everybody working together with the city, and the difficulty that the administration had in terms of having to put this together, where essentially the largest dollar impact is going to come from individuals. At this point, I'd like to open any questions from the board members. Before I do have one question. Since I'm chairman, I'll take the opportunity to come up with a question. Elio,
Yes, sir.
We're going to carry the burden next year of $1.5 million. That's of the 640 we've added to that, the $900,000, the carrying cost for the early retirement program.
Closer to 1.6.
Right.
Yes.
I would assume that the contra account that we have, that we've been using, is a theoretical model of $640,000. The population going forward is going to be significantly less than what we had in the past. Am I correct in that? Because of what we've done to...
Correct. Given the current year plan and the total applicant pool is 71. 71 is possibly almost close to threefold our annual experience rate.
Is this something that we'd be able to, during the course of the year, before we do next year's budget, have a better feel for a more realistic turnover in terms of the numbers of people we have and how much we lost from the population today? In other words, I don't want to carry a fictitious number, not that I want to carry. I try not to absorb a fictitious number of 640,000 that may be unrealistic and us trying to really achieve.
Yes. However, to revise, using it as an arbitrary value this time, to revise a $640,000 credit account line item, say down to $240,000, would still require an infusion of $400,000 of new dollars to our general fund budget. So we would still be able to $640,000 of the void in our budget.
For clarity too, Mr. Generally, each year is that money on the contra account represents approximately 25 to 30 faculty leaving one way or the other, either through retirement or attrition. That's been the assumption. If you accept this program, and you can see how it's helped us, if you accept it, then the target amount of individuals to leave, 25 to 30, will not be there.
Right.
So the assumption the city made back 20 years ago, before they had this program, was that each year, the in and out, you know what, you're going to have a savings. We're going to realize, you don't know where it is, we'll give you that much less. I think what we need to do is work with the city and say, look, this is a cost avoidance. We're not going to have that accountability for us. You're not going to have to worry about it because we're not going to have the 25, 30. I don't know, maybe we're going to have 4, 5, 10. I don't know. And maybe for a few years do away with that part of the account and fully fund us. Even if they fully fund us, the contra account each year, in a sense, is close to $1 million. Each year, the first $1 million we have has to go to paying for that. That's cost avoidance. It's like a bond indebtedness. That would be a more sensible discussion that we should have with the city. Because in itself, we're taking care of that amount of money that we can't take credit for.
Well, I'm glad we have our Director of Finance from the city here tonight, so he has a little bit of a heads up as to what we're going to be coming to him with. Do I have any questions from the board members? For Mr. Long, Mr. Kirby?
I have a question. I apologize for being late, and I'm sorry if I may have missed this, but what is the rationale behind the 90% replacement rate of people who've accepted the package? And for every 10%, what would we save? Say if we went to 8%, 70%, because I would imagine the fewer teachers we replace who've left voluntarily will minimize the disruption for people who are being terminated involuntarily. Have we thought about looking at that percentage?
I can speak to the latter, please. Your question, part of your question.
Is your mic on?
Yes, sorry. I can speak to the latter part of your question. Each 10% reduction in workforce applied against the 71 applicants to the year of the plan amounts to approximately $420,000 of added savings. So, at one replacement, we moved $420,000. We were to move to an 80% model, add an additional $420,000 of savings. Each 10 percentile points, equivalent of $420,000.
So the original part of the question, how did we get 90%? And what are the risks of going below 90%?
Well, we were a little higher. As you may recall, one of the things that we were looking at, we basically backing into a number. I mean, realistically, if we know what are our givings, 3% over and above this year's budget, and we know what our expenditures are, we need to work back. I mean, that's how we work this out. And one of the principles that we tried to put here, and in the beginning we talked about trying to distribute the reductions across all levels. If you look at that, it is somewhat of an equity and parity between elementary, middle, and high. Not exactly, but theoretically, there is some parity and relationship at each level. So that was one of the criteria. When you look at the 9 at the high school, we haven't even done high school select the election. Our course selection process, we've got them that started earlier. We're going to have to look at courses much more critically in terms of can we offer them. To reduce 9 is not going to be easy. You see what it took us to reduce 9 at the middle school. I didn't have the luxury because the way a middle school is set up, it doesn't have a program where students elect and do put a schedule together. It's done pretty much for them, so we had to go to actual areas to cut back. So what you see at the middle would be actual. I know of nowhere else to go there. We considered counselors. I don't think it's a good idea. They're vital in our programming. We have 3 counselors at each middle school. We have counselors leaving. We looked at that, and knowing what I know middle school, I did not think that was a good idea. So that's why we left those in there. At the elementary, it says a reduction of how many? 7? In the regular
Total elementary with math specialists is actually 13.
Okay. Other than the math specialist, which was one-on-one, the others are prediction. I'm hoping our enrollment is such that I can do that. If not, we're going to have a problem. So that was not as clean as even the middle school. The assumption there is that we're going to keep our first grade and kindergarten at 20s and not increase those. And I'm hoping we can do that. So by doing that, when we looked at the EREP program, you may recall we said we needed a 50 cutoff to make it break even. It really turned out to be 29. Is that correct still? At 29 we broke even? Is that about right?
Yeah,
Let's say 30. Let's all agree to say 30.
Everyone has different salaries.
Let's
so
all say
it's
30, then it's 30.
29 to 30.
29 to 30. So we had 20 extra. Therefore, there was a greater savings if I could do a one-to-one that you're talking about. Because if I don't have to replace someone on the ERIP, instead of saving partially, I saved the whole amount of money. So we tried to look at that. When we looked at everything and looked at the parity, we came up with the number you saw in terms of reduction, in terms of teachers. We did administratively, simply that was really what I'm going to advise to the board in a material I'm going to hand you this week and how we ought to look at our curriculum structure in the school system. That, I think, would, if the board thinks that's acceptable, they'll reduce 3 positions. But any way we have it, we're going to have to either reinstitute that program. If we do, and the board wants to go back to the old system, we have to add 3 more positions in there.
There's another piece too
Yeah.
that I can help with. You asked the question of, would it help us to deal with positions that are being not funded or eliminated by way of attrition? That's actually happening. One of the numbers that's in there, for instance, is the number we used for savings when we looked at who was actually going out versus the position itself. Instead of laying someone off and taking a lower number, we were able to take a higher number because the people were actually going out in those positions. So a good example, at the elementary school, math specialists, for instance, are the same certification in most parts as the in-classroom teachers. So a math specialist who loses their position can teach in the classroom. We have 11 of the people in the retirement incentive program who are elementary school teachers who are leaving. We have 13 people being positions being cut. So 11 of those 13s of those 13 people with transfers that we have rights under the contract to proceed with, what happens is we can save those jobs. That's 11 people who voluntarily left as opposed to 11 people we had to let go. And then there's 2 left over. No promises, but obviously the hope is that through natural leaves and whatnot, that no one in that 13 people being cut will actually lose their job. There are other avenues we have where, for instance, people have certifications that apply both at the middle and the high school. Someone may be losing a job at the middle, can move up to the high on one of these situations where we're cutting positions at both schools. So, we've said it's 90% replacement. Actually, it's not. It's hard. That was a straight off the top number of 7 people, and that we couldn't double count. So the only way we could do it was then to get specific about the positions we were proposing cutting, and in many of those cases, we were able to realize a higher savings.
What's interesting, the calculus of this gets difficult because we've looked at, and what we tried to be mindful of was not double count people.
Right.
Because that could really create a problem. So we rechecked. In fact, we thought about going to the 80% model, and we went and rechecked and found that we didn't have to do that. So that's how we got to 90%. We were trying to match. And we started doing that after Friday when we knew who was leaving. We really didn't know that until Friday for the last few days.
It's unclear to me what the position of the coordinators will be in the oncoming budget. Are we going with what we have right now? Are we getting rid of the coordinators? I'm not sure exactly.
Okay, let me try. What you see there in front of you would be if we were to restore the model we had 2 years ago. Okay. What I'm suggesting to the board, what I'm going to give you this week, is my suggestion in terms of what I would recommend to the board to consider in light of the 3 retirements last year and 2 more retirements this year. We have from our 4 days. We have most of them retired now. in looking at that critically and looking at our needs now, which were different than when they instituted the model some years ago, there are some things that we can do. So there's a blending of what we're doing currently with where I think we ought to go. But there's a proposal in front of the board that I'll be giving you this week to consider. If you decide not to do that and return to that model, it doesn't really matter. We have to put this money back into it. So that's a conversation I thought we would have separately from this. But I needed to put in the whole amount of money if we either go either way you want to go. So that's a board decision that you'd make in the next, hopefully the next 2 or 3 board meetings.
Can I ask Dr. Talbot, have you gotten the input from your principals on these things? Or the cabinet made the decisions and all, but to me, the people who work in the trenches and all probably really would know what the impact of these things are. Did you get the impact? Did you have meetings with principals and so forth?
You're talking about the budget?
On some of these decisions like this, or was it basically a cabinet decision?
No. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, when we started looking at developing the budget, I had a conversation with the principals, telling them that it was going to impact us and one of the cuts in terms of where we were going. From that point, we spoke with them today, actually. So the input we've been getting from them has been basically through talking to individuals, not aggregately together. The problem I've had here is that if I sat down and gave everybody this before I gave it to you, things got out that were distorted. So what I'm going to do, what I did this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I invited all the principals over to talk about the budget. Not all of them came. We sat down with the unions today and gave them information. They had an idea that they didn't have a lot of specificity until today, because a lot of it was predicated on what happened last Friday. So they saw for the first time what you're seeing now. Those principals that came at 4 o'clock, we had a conversation about what you're seeing now. We are sending home to them tonight this presentation with the thing saying, if they have questions, please come and talk to me. If you have ideas, let me know what they are. And now that it's out in the open, we can have conversations about it. I didn't want this getting out because it would just be too destructive. You remember last year with just the reading what happened. So, it was in guarded consultation. I did not have a dialogue per se. I'm ready to have it now because it's on the table and it's open and you have it in front of you. The council now has it and we can have a conversation. I don't know if you guys want to respond to that point. Your conversations that you've had, because you've been working in HR on it and we've been doing this.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, we were doing this in a very detailed way. We didn't want to just throw out all kinds of ideas that could lead to a lot of misrepresentation, confusion, and whatnot. However, we have been giving the administrators, both individually and in the meeting that Dr. Sal mentioned, which I wasn't at, but people have been given the heads up. And we've been giving the union, the administrators and the secretaries union a heads up. We met, Dr. Deluski and I met with them a week or so ago, gave them an idea of the numbers of the cuts that we were talking about. Everyone has been on board as far as telling us, what their feelings were, what they thought was important. But again, it's been really on an individual basis. Not everyone's participated. We did have a meeting today. Some of the principals came, had the same reaction I'm sure you're all having of pain, and they gave us some thoughts, and those will all be considered, obviously. Then today we did meet with, again, the presidents of the administrators and the secretaries union, and gave them what you're seeing now. Not the presentation itself, but the sheets that went behind it, went into it in detail, discussed various options, things that we can talk about maybe to achieve some further savings to reduce the number of layoffs that we might have to endure. But it has been an informal process, but one where we've tried to keep as many of the stakeholders advised as we could, as best we could.
Bob, anything on that?
Yeah, just one comment that I would add that I think the board should be aware of the fact that as we met with with Bill Murray, who's the president of NEA Danbury, and Mike Clark, who's the president of Danbury's Ministers Association, that they've been very cooperative in terms of how we will do business in terms of dealing with the staff reorganization. Where people are properly certified, as Mr. Gray indicated before, we want people to keep their jobs and still live within the dollars we have to spend. And some of our regular protocols, we've worked out with Mr. Murray and Mr. Clark, that we will waive some of our regular protocols in terms of staff transfers in order to help achieve that goal. So I thought that the board, should know how cooperative both of those unions have been with us in working through this particular project.
Yes.
Jim?
Yeah, Elio, just jump in if I'm wrong, but this is a best case scenario, meaning that come February 2nd or 4th, I'm not quite sure when the governor's going to make their recommendations to the legislation, and from what I hear and listen to and read, that they're going to get a big bop this year, and it looks like the cities are going to get some kind of reduction, and probably us. This is zero-based, which means, am I right that this is zero-based? That means we're saying that this budget's preliminary, that the feds won't, the state won't cut us, and that the city will give us 3%. Am I right?
That is correct. Zero-based budgeting to begin with, and then we restored 3%. Just clarity on the early February date. My understanding the early February
February 2nd.
February 2nd is to discuss and settle on the shortfall to this year's budget, not on next year's budget proposals and funding and assistance to municipalities.
Well, the February 2nd I'm alluding to is we're told the governor's going to release her next year's budget.
Oh, okay.
What's on the table, and I don't know, is if there's going to be reductions to this year's. I don't know when she's releasing that information. But on February 2nd, we'll be getting the governor's budget. After that, then the legislators will be going to work. And when I was advised, I think I mentioned it last week to the board, that it may be July before we really know.
Well, July 1st is the budget year for the city, so I don't really know how we can operate like that. But we're looking at the best case scenario, so right now we're down 40 positions, so it's at least 40 positions that we'll be losing. Based on zero plus 3%, which is highly unlikely in my opinion. I certainly hope the city will help us, but they're not in any better shape than the state, as far as I know. And so I'm really probably sorrowful that there probably will be more cuts in this budget. There'll be more layoffs. I'm sorry to say that, but I can't really believe that the state government is going to give us any more money. So this is just the beginning of the hurt.
Ms. Heisel?
Thank you. Dr. Pascarella, I understand that we must make slashy cuts. However, would you agree that perhaps it would be prudent for us to wait until we get the final Cambridge report on the failing middle schools? What we're going to cut out from the middle school, this is the heart of their program, if you're going to really call them middle schools. Family consumer science, fine arts, we must find something not to absolutely destroy the middle school concept of the program. These are the children who need these areas desperately. Perhaps we should look at some of the electives at the high school. I know everything is painful, but perhaps we really should see the final Cambridge report on the state of our middle schools. That's going to determine what these children are able to do when they reach the high school. It's tragic that we're going to lose math consultants, math which is, we need math teachers, we need children who understand and flourish in math. I think we really do need to look at these cuts very, very carefully. I know they're all painful, because this was just an idea that I think I would hope that we would consider to really have the final Cambridge reports. I'm sure you know, as someone who are superintendent for the entire system. We know how critical planning consumer science. Perhaps the academy members do not understand what this entails. But these are this is the work that our middle school children do. They keep them engaged and wanting to learn. So this is just my suggestion. Thank you.
I have one question. Just on the other options that are to be considered, the notation relative to the reduction of one elementary school, is that something that would be possible in the foreseeable future? Certainly we couldn't do it, I think, next year only because the Head Start facility is not going to be ready, but is this something that maybe 2 years, 3 years down the road, that if we are in dire straits, we would have to...
We know we had that study conducted by the organization, the Savern, and they had recommendations and doing some redistricting and that kind of thing. If our enrollment stays the way it is and the Head Start moves out of our intermediate, there will be a number of, I think a total of, I'm looking at about 14 classrooms. 12 across the district there. We could close one of the, I'd have to look at it, primary buildings there, and then make the intermediate now a K, possibly as all of the K5. You'd probably have to then redistrict some of the students into the King Street area because they'll be moving some sections out of there that'll be leaving. So it might be possible if, in fact, we don't move towards a full-day kindergarten. I mean, that was part of the, if we move to a full-day kindergarten, expanding that, then we needed 22 classrooms. Well, you couldn't very much classify out the school. So if that doesn't happen, which is not looking as likely, could we do that? I think that's something that we could look at and study as a possibility of doing something like that. But it would, next year would be awful difficult because nothing's moving.
Great, Kirby.
Question. Given the assumptions that we're looking, we're projecting a 3% increase with a 40 FTE staff reduction. I don't know, Elio, if you can estimate what the FTE reduction would be if we got a 0% increase. So if we were held flat to the 112 million, around what FTE decrease would we need to affect to get to 0? What would that mean?
In the range of 35 to 40?
Additional?
Yes.
Additional. We actually started on that exercise and no one had the stomach to keep going. I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you. They can all verify that. We stopped right there. I said, just stop. If that's what we do, we really have some issues. So
An unrelated question. As we continue to have an operating deficit at the magnet school, looking at this sheet, 648,000, what thought was given to reducing some of the sections at the magnet school to reduce that operating deficit?
You want to answer? Okay. The magnet school grant is going to be advantageous in some respects because if the formula that's being recommended actually increases the amount of revenue that we should be getting. The issue you have at the middle school in considering that thought would be the middle school, in order to access the funds from the state, the way it is calculated, we have to stay within a 60-40 balance. So if we do any reductions and harm that 60-40 balance, we then get no money from the state. And what's the aggregate money that you anticipate getting next year?
Value of a couple $1 million in state reimbursements. Let's keep in mind that the school was constructed via state funding on a proposed matrix of 6 class levels, K through 5, 3 wide, 18 classrooms. We were fortunate in our first year that we added classrooms beginning with year 2 to begin with a K4 offer, only 2 wide in the league. Dr. Delusi, correct me if I'm wrong. We then in year 2 expanded to the full model as was originally presented to the state bonding commission for a 3 by 6 grade levels, K through 5 by 3 of 18. This time, to change or revert back to a smaller matrix design would require some time for and would create a bottleneck of the current student mass to pass through all the upper grade levels. Today's kindergarten students in 3 classroom size would still exist for years 2 through 5. Otherwise, it could be, if we eliminate 1 class per grade level, then we would have another perhaps return. We would have to return select students back to their home school district, per se.
Plus the money.
Right. So over time, it's possible to accomplish over time. Yes, but we would run a risk with the state funding, given that the proposed design was for a matrix size of 18 classrooms.
You may have been reading in the paper, some towns are thinking about, not our town, but towns that are thinking about giving up on their magnet school. I think it was in Hampton. I don't know what's ever come about that, but that is not a host magnet. It's one that the rest is operating. In our case, we operate that. It is ours. The only way you could do that would be, in a full sense, was that it was a $20 million building. Somewhere it was calculated that it would have cost us $10 million to build it, is to pay off the $10 million note, becomes one of our schools, work those compact schools out of it, and then that would be one of our schools, and you can commensurately close another school. That's another option that's possible. But then you'd have to pay off the $10 million, which isn't calculated into any of this, because we never had to pay for that. I don't think Danbury paid anything for that. We put the furnishing in and what have you, but we did not pay for the building. It was 100% reimbursed.
Anything else?
Yes, sir.
Would it, also with the new, I think the law takes effect with the switch to magnet school, would that be next year that we estimated that there'd be about $100,000 additional monies to us with the...
Under the proposed change.
Correct.
Right, has not been voted
Okay.
at this time. So all of my budget calculations are current law,
Currently,
not proposed law.
Rachel?
I just really have 2 questions. First one is, we talked about outsourcing some of the services, and I wanted to see if we could take a look at that, to see what savings we could offer there. And the other part of that is, we were looking at to make students to make sure they were in district, or to make sure they were supposed to be in the district and schools, if they're, at the addresses, and if they were supposed to be outside of the district.
You mean that if they're non-residents attending?
Right.
Right.
Are we still doing that?
Oh yeah, we have a detective when we get notices and we get mail back. We have someone hired, goes out, checks it out, verifies it. They come in, we have a meeting. That happens continually. Yes.
Yes, Louis, could you speak to us of the 71 people that are taking yearly retirement, the core critical pieces that we're...
The shortage area type positions? Yeah, I don't have the list in front of me at the moment, but I will certainly take that back. Thank you. I didn't think I did. It's always something that was surprising. Yeah, they are spread around. We believe there's a little bit less than half are technically shortage areas. The 2 areas where there are large groupings are at the high school, one math and one science, unfortunately.
Very critical.
Yes, but what we did to try to compensate for that, if you recall, when we were talking about the plan initially, we used different replacement costs.
Yes.
We used $55,000 for a regular teacher, which is a conservative number. Remember, that excludes benefit packages. And I believe it's about a master's 3 with 3 years, which is very conservative. We used a $65,000 number for people who are in shortage areas. So the idea being that if you average the 2, based on the percentage of shortage area versus non-shortage area, it was roughly about $60,000 we used as replacement cost plus benefit package, which this year would be for family $20,000, probably more like $22,000 next year, talking about $82,000. So we use those figures to determine the savings that you saw here. But yes, we did get a significant number in the secondary level of math and science, which we knew was going to happen. We also got a lot of people who weren't in shortage areas. But that is, and when this is on your agenda to accept the plan, you will have exactly that breakdown of what's a shortage area. I'll have it for you in building, by person, by, shortage area, replacement, by everything. So you can look at it and make a good judgment as to whether you want to move forward. I believe with the assumptions we used and with the overall number of people we're letting go, it's still acceptable. But yes, we did have a significant hit, particularly at the high school in the science and math.
The assumption that you're using for the $65,000 base cost, is that an average across the state that you're using, or is it
our number?
It's your number.
I used our number based on our contract. Basically having to bring someone in at about year 5 of the master's, which you don't necessarily need to take the full bachelor's. But once we know whether or not the teacher contract will be the teacher contract, as we ratified it, Common Council's considering it. If that number stands, we used for our projections, we used it as if it does stand the fourth quarter. So yes, but I used our numbers, not the average across the state, because how we hire them depends on how many years' experience they have somewhere else. We're not obligated to take those years, but we can't. The contract says we can't go over that. So if someone comes in with 5 years, and we want them, we can only give them 5 years. But we can. We do have a lot of leeway. We use conservative numbers.
Well, the good news about shortage areas, even some of the individuals, if the board accepts the program, have indicated they'd like to come back and work. So the shortage area allows someone to retire and then return and work. So there was an acknowledgement on the part of the state realizing that this might happen. So we could go, and I know there are teachers that are teaching every day 2 classes. They're retired for most of the week, and so you can do those if you have singletons that you really can fill. And that may happen. We may have to ask some of our individuals to come back, and some have indicated they would have an interest.
Right.
But it can only be in the shortage area to give them full compensation. There's another form if it's not in the shortage area, but that's the most advantageous one for most people.
The other advantage we have, and we probably talked about this when we were thinking about the plan, is given we're not alone, obviously. I mean, Denver isn't the only city and town that's facing significant cuts. If you look at the budget increases for even the down Fairfield County communities, they're very low. So other communities are laying off, and we will be recruiting for those shortage areas in a better pool, because you have a lot of people who are being laid off. Presumably, if they don't have an incentive plan like we do, they will be people at the lower end of the scale, people who are looking for a job, and we will have a better shot at replacing those shortage areas. And the high school is aware, the principal, the assistant principal are aware of who's gone, and they're already trying to figure out how to cover some of the AP classes, some classes for next year, and then backfill people, entry-level people. So we feel, we're not shocked by it.
The other side that gives me a little more comfort, because I think it's difficult to recruit those areas, is that if you accept this program, we will go out early and recruit.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big difference, because these other places may not know until they pass their budgets. But if we know on the sheet of paper who's leaving, that's why we, you put them through the process in terms of they're actually gone. We can go out and start hiring early and recruit, and that does give us a distinct advantage. We have a plan moving in that direction, so that all sort of helps us.
Michael, do you have a question?
This follows recognizing that there's going to be tremendous competition for teachers in the shortage area. Could you just comment on what the most recent thinking is on whether or not the shortages will continue to become more acute on an annualized basis, and how quickly they will become more acute?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think we have it was happening quickly before this year. I think the shortage areas, I mean, even English secondary teachers got added as a shortage area this year. Okay? So the shortage areas were growing severity very quickly. But this year has created a bump in the road that I believe, and no one is going to really know until they see what all the layoffs are this year. But because there are going to be a significant number of layoffs statewide, the shortage area crisis may be temporarily abated. We also have a large number of people leaving the private sector who may be more interested in entering the alternative path to certification. So we have other avenues. If the economy were still chugging along, we'd be in real trouble real soon. But I think that in the short run, there's an opportunity for this district at least to pick up some good people this year. So I think the severity of the shortage may be lessened, but no one's really going to know until the year's over.
Just a point of clarification, either Ellie or Rachel, which areas of outsourcing are you referring to?
Well, we had talked about it when we meeting. We didn't really go into which areas. It was something we said we were going to look into.
Ellie, off the top of your head, are there any areas of outsourcing?
At one time, both administration and the board considered the area of custodial support.
Custodial support?
The custodial services. We also at one time looked at combined resources in the area of technology.
Technology, I'm sorry, Ellie, you're not speaking in your mic, it's hard to hear you.
Apologies. Custodial services and technologies are two areas that both the administration and I believe board members at the time of the conversation had reviewed and analyzed.
If I can comment on custodial. As you know, and I obviously can't, we're outside of executive session, I can't really comment on ongoing bargaining, but we are in ongoing bargaining with the custodians. All I can say is that with regard to outsourcing custodial services, that's something that must be negotiated with the union. They have a claim to that union work. So without discussing it in public, I can tell you that that's certainly something that the administration at least has thought about.
Wasn't purchasing part of it too? Not to jump in. Purchasing wasn't purchasing part of
That absolutely, yes, you're correct.
purchasing IT, the custodians that would make the purchasing of the IT, they've been thrown under maintenance.
Yes.
Just have one further question. You mentioned earlier that obviously salaries are about 80% of the budget, but yet 100% of the cuts they made are to FTEs. To what extent did we look at our non-FTE related goods and services? As an example, the bus contract, but there are many others.
Yes.
And so how did we come to the conclusion that we have a zero opportunity in non-FTE lines?
Part of this evening's handout. Before you have a 2009-2010 cost projection matrix. I'll kindly allow me a minute or two. On the salary accounts, the projected increase next year, blended average is at 4.4%. Mr. Fox, as you do approximately salaries and benefits, close to 80 cents on a dollar. Social Security is a peg to salary accounts. Health, life, dental insurance, my projection this time is a 12% increase. I've met with our current provider, Cigna. I've also invited Anthem to the table and will release and have released an RFP for a competitive bid process against the projected 12%. Workers' compensation, I propose for the new year budget a reduction of 20%. Current year appropriation in $1 million. Last year we had appropriated $1 million as well. Since the inception of the GASB requirement, with the assistance of Mr. St. Hilaire on the city side, the Board of Education has established a reserve according to GASB requirement, approximately $500,000 for prior year workers' compensation claims. Going forward, our annual expenditure trends at approximately $700,000 to $750,000. My projection next year is for $800,000, which would be very little contribution next year against the GASB requirement on an annual basis for the Board of Education. So outside of the salary or benefits, the first reduction made to the schedule is the workers' compensation, $200,000. Public utilities, 15% projected increase in public utilities. To support all of our buildings, it's flat funded. I believe, top of my head, this is probably the 4th or 5th year that we've flat funded building maintenance. Transportation, if you recall, in transportation, we went out to competitive bid. We have a new provider this year. The cumulative savings or cost avoidance over 5 years is $2.5 million, $500,000 per year for the Board of Education. Transportation is a contractual obligation for next year. Contractual increase is at 2.5%. I show a 5% increase here. The board had approved after we had recommended in addition to the fleet of 3 vehicles, 2 full-size buses and a minibus. The cost is built into next year's budget, revised projection 5%.
We're still working with them.
And we're also working with them as well too.
Trying to just...
Yes, trying to see if we can have a concession against the contractual thank you. In the areas of insurance, liability, auto insurance, and athletic, in many areas we partner with the city. I have a flat funded for next year. Telephones, which is net of federal funding E-rate, we spend on an annual basis approximately $500,000 in communications. We receive approximately a 48% credit from the federal government. I have a flat funded at $262,000. Tuition in the area of special education will likely fall short. My projection is at 10%. Fuel for buildings, 10%. Gasoline is at 10%. District equipment, which includes technology, once again, flat funded at $1.3 million. We have an increase to the Board of Education's local contribution match to the Head Start program of 16%.
Now, Elio, that just 3 years ago, when I first went, was 100,000.
About 150,000.
And it's gone up.
That is correct. Yes. The local board's match to the magnet school, $640,000. Slight depreciation of value, reduction in value. All other
Can you
options.
stay on that for a second, because I think when you answer Dick's question, I just want to make sure we influence these. This number is predicated on what we know now as the funding model.
Correct. I would only, I would.
Okay, I just want, if the funding model proposed by the State Board of Ed, and you heard me say this probably ad nauseum, that a lot is being decided around the Sheffield case. Most of the money is going to Harvard, so they're redistributing the wealth. But if they, and even with that, they're recommending the increase. If the governor accepts that increase and the legislators, what does it do to that bottom line? Based on the model I gave you, just...
Based on the model, we would benefit by the value of approximately $110,000.
So that number would be 520, $500,000, just over $500,000.
Correct.
Just so...
All the above identified items total $114 million against the 5.7% increase of $118 million. All the other object codes in cumulative value around $4 million, less than 4 cents on the dollar. And we also have their year flat funded under 1% reduction increase. So outside of the contractual obligations, salaries, benefits, contracted servants, we made as many cuts wherever possible. Again, the total contribution, the cuts, under or approximately $300,000.
At this point, I'm assuming the board has more questions. I'd like to open up questions to members of the Commons Council. Are there any questions, anybody?
If you wouldn't mind, can we take a 5-minute recess to stretch and perhaps use the lavatory?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us this evening. A question I have is, looking over the cost projections that was given us this evening, I noted that there was almost a $3.6 million increase over the prior year. And when I take into consideration the 40 positions that are proposed to be reduced, That's a savings of $3.8 million. So my question goes back to the contracts, the teacher's contract that's been proposed, and the administrative contract that's been approved. So the way I look at it is that those contracts are costing almost equivalent of 40 full-time equivalents. Is my analysis correct? And can I assume that, or, because the increase here is 3.6, the savings is 3.8, but yet you got a contract increase, so it's almost like that's a wash. I have to assume that the contract that's been approved or proposed to be approved is costing $3.6 million, which is equivalent almost to 4 full-time teachers equivalents. So I just want to see if my analysis is correct.
Elio, would you like to address Mr. Shanice's concern?
If I understand your question or your comment, pardon me, on the projected request of the city for 3%, it's approximately a $3.3 million
Increase over the year before.
increase over the current year, leaving a operating shortfall of $3.8 million.
Right, and your proposal was when your 4 full-time equivalents was a savings of $3.8 million.
That is correct, yes.
So if that's, now your projected budget does not include that.
Correct.
So if you subtract that out of it, it gives you back to the original what you were last year of 70 million.
70 million, correct. The only thing that I would that I offer is that the $3.8 million projected shortfall is an aggregate value across all costs, not just those of educators or a select 1 or 2 or 3 bargaining labor groups. However, approximately, our total labor costs are about $75 million. The 2 bargaining groups that you mentioned, cumulative value perhaps somewhere around $55 million. I don't have the calculator in front of me, but 55 out of the 75, 20 out of the 75, probably 70 cents on a dollar, 70%. So I would argue that approximately 70%, one could present that 70% of the $3.8 million is the equivalent of contractual labor contracts to those 2 groups that you've identified, yes.
So equivalent to a full-time equivalent, how much would that be? How many full-time equivalents would that equal to?
7%, 3.8.
Out of 3.8, 45, I believe I was asked that question earlier, and I would establish a range somewhere maybe close to about 45 FTEs.
So 45 full-time?
Yeah, about 45 FTEs.
So,
But to get to there, let me understand further. If to get to 0, then all of labor groups would move ahead to 0 to make the difference of $1 million. Is that correct? It increases.
That's correct. We can close the 3.8 shortfall with 40 FTEs. The equivalent on the remaining 3.4, somewhere between the equivalent of 40 positions.
So the way I understand it, if there was no, if you took the old contract and applied it to the current year, so there will be no short, that will be enough to cover all the full-time equivalents that you were proposing to reduce. Almost, and that all close enough. So you can say that the fact that you ratified a new contract is actually costing 40 teacher positions.
Equivalent, yes, is your argument.
Mr. Chair. Thank you for having us tonight. I have a question of a statement as well. First, I'll start with the statement. I don't recall who made this statement amongst you folks here saying that the council had the teachers' contracts to consider. It was just a passing statement. I just want to go on the record and say we have not received that yet. And so we really don't officially know what's in it for the record. But to Dr. Sell, I I think I misunderstood something. On page 5 here, it credits cost reduction central office district. What are the administrators, the 3.2 administrators that are being cut?
2 years ago, we had, for everyone asked, we had Eddie B. left and one of the, Bill Shields. When we were going through our reductions last year and they retired, we decided not to fill those to help us to get to our balancing the budget. So part of that, just about 99% of that reflects those. If we move forward to the new design that I'm going to recommend to the board, we would not have to replace 3.3 administrators. If we were looking at last year's numbers, when we had them in our budget. The bodies that we had last year and this year, there's 3 less positions. But next year, I'm going to ask for a reconfiguration. That reconfiguration would not need those 3 positions included in it. So we're reducing those administrators.
All right, am I to assume then that the positions of coordinators are eliminated, or are they going to be?
No, what you see there is there's going to be a reduction in the recommendation, and it will be in our curriculum structure. Where it is, the board is going to have to consider that representative. But there will be a reduction of administrators.
Okay. Are you looking elsewhere for administrative reductions other than the coordinators? Let me put it to you that way.
Well, what does that say? That says one more at the cabinet level. We're going to be redeploying one of the cabinet members to a position that's going to allow us to reimburse the salary. So there won't be a reduction per person, but the salary will just about get to 0.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. Of the 24 teachers that are proposed to be laid off and the 67 that are supposed to be retiring through early retirement, can we combine those numbers together and come up with 91? Is that something that we would consider, or some of the 67 retiring early, part of the 24 teachers? So it's 91 teachers total?
No. The calculus as it applies to the retirement incentive, we have 71 educators. The makeup of the 71, 67 teachers, 4 administrators.
Right.
Going forward, we will replace all 4 administrators. We cannot reduce workforce in the area of principalships. Okay? So you immediately replace the 4 administrators that will participate in the retirement plan. We are now left with a net value of the 67. Of the 67, with a 90% replacement model, 10% off of the 71 is approximately 7 FTEs. We've reduced the 7 FTEs from the 67 teachers down to a rehire or replacement of 60. The net impact, according to page 6, bottom schedule, classroom teachers are the 24, to which we add 7 in addition to the 24 as a result of the ERIP program. So it's a 24 plus 7 classroom teachers. The remaining 9 are earmarked in the area of math specialists.
Thank you.
So it's a 24 plus 7, 31.
I'm sure that was the same, a very similar question than Mr. Fox answered. And I'm still not exactly 100% comfortable with that answer, but I'll have to go home and convince myself. Also, has anyone considered a salary freeze? Because I'm looking here at the numbers, and if the salaries were frozen, 80% of the shortfall is completely eliminated. So I'd like also for us to consider a complete salary freeze. That way we could not have to worry about laying off so many teachers. Speaking of the teacher attrition, just one more last thing, I'll give the mic away. I see that we're losing some bilingual teachers from middle school. We mentioned earlier that we're losing a bunch of math and science teachers from the high schools. My concern there is making sure that we fulfill our NEASC requirements, making sure that we have the right number of personnel in those key positions. Not only NEASC, but also if we don't, we'll shortchange our students in the long run.
I finally have an answer for someone. It's not made public, but it's very important that you all know that our superintendent has agreed to freeze his personal salary until we get through all of this.
There was another question over there. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the idea of a wage freeze. As we all know, the wages, and I think the other gentleman brought this up one way or another earlier, the wages are something that we need to bargain with the unions. The teachers union does have a ratified contract from this board, and it is correct, by the way, that the actual contract has not yet been finalized and forwarded to the Common Council. Our expectation is once it is, that they will take it up for consideration. If they do take it up, 30 days from the filing of the contract with the city, they can choose to reject the contract, essentially, if they do. So that, just to clarify, that is the case. So let's just assume if the Common Council goes forward and accepts the contract, the other piece of this was an arbitration award for the administrators union. That was something that was awarded, and it is now in force at 4.51%. The teachers' contract is at 4.25%. In order for us to have wage freezes, we would have to enter into midterm bargaining with the unions. The unions have to agree to do that. If they were to agree to do that, we would be more than happy to discuss a wage freeze and a step freeze even, if that were something. Because remember, the way the teachers' compensation works is you have a general wage increase, and then a lot of teachers move up the wage scale. So they get an increase as well, which is the blended number of 4.25. So the real savings comes when you, for a year, you don't have either general wage or the wage freeze. If the unions were interested, I'm sure, we certainly haven't entered into these discussions at this point, but if the unions were willing, I'm sure that the district would be more than willing to discuss those things.
Segueing off of that, everybody is being asked, or many people are being asked to give up a lot of things that we didn't think we'd want to give up or have to give up just a year or two ago. And I understand the legal parameters to deal with arbitration awards and with union negotiations and contracts that have been ratified by the board and are in somewhat of a limbo. But that being said, why really should we wait for somebody to come to us or come to you or have them come before this board and say, hey, we want to give something back, without saying, hey, come back, let's have you propose something to us. We want you to give something back. We may not be able to hold your feet to the fire on this, but let's look at the UAW. Let's look at many other areas where people have said, fine, I'm going to voluntarily give something up to protect the broader good. This council will have to deal with that, and I know we have teachers on this council, we have people who have children in the public school system, private school system, whatever, we all pay the same taxes, those of us that live here in Denver. So I think, and I'm sure my fellow council people agree that they'd probably like to see a little bit more initiative, and if it has to come from a possible, not speaking for all of them, a rejection by some of us of the teachers' contract before the council to wake some people up, maybe that's the case, or what the words that are spoken here. But I think a lot of that was done, those negotiations were based on what we all thought was happening many months ago, not what we now realize is happening. The state keeps changing its projections of how bad things are. The federal government's doing the same thing. I think that people on the other side of the table understand that. So that's sort of a general statement that I think a lot of us would like to see. And I see people shaking their heads, yes, they agree with that. So that's one thing. But a couple of specific issues of to Mr. Longo with regard to the projection for 09 and 10, 201, 203, the insurance. I assume that that number would go down relative to the number of positions reduced, or is that projection predicated on the reduced positions that you're proposing? Because you got a $2.1 million increase, I think, here in insurance costs.
I made an adjustment. The number that I received from our current insurance provider, Cigna's, for a 13% renewal rate. So I've made a 1 percentile point reduction thus far. We'll continue to negotiate with Cigna and pit the giants against each other. I welcome that back to the table. I would like to see a single-digit end result in the area of insurance.
So, but is there a projection off of this number as to what the, I assume the salary estimates, or the salary, not estimates, but the salary numbers, the medians, the high, they're putting in, include benefits as part of those, or are those straight salaries?
We've analyzed, I've worked with Mr. Bray over the past week. We've analyzed the numbers, not only on the salary side, but also on the benefits. On the benefits side, we believe, it's a joint opinion here held, that the benefits will in the end be a wash between the exiting positions, exiting staff, and the replacement and the replacement hires. On the 7, with the 10% non-replacement, on the 7, I've already adjusted the projection for healthcare going forward.
But beyond those participating in the ERIP, the actual reductions in the full-time positions, those would translate into reductions in
already calculated
benefits. That's calculated as part of the salaries.
Yes. That is correct.
Okay, that's what.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I can just comment briefly on something you said.
Sure. Ask a question.
I certainly did not. Yeah, I certainly did not mean to imply that we were waiting for the teachers and administrators to come to us and say, "Hey, we want to give you money." The nature of our relationship, obviously, with the unions is a delicate one, and one that I don't normally talk about in public meetings. But I could say it is very much, this. I certainly, for the one who deals with them on a regular basis, am very interested in talking about something like that. But I can't discuss what's happened.
If I may follow up, I apologize. So we're all operating under the assumption of, the current numbers, and Mr. Scozzafava pointed out, we're dealing with what we are projecting. These are the numbers, and those very well could change. So we as council people, I think, are going to understand what are we potentially looking at that's going to come to us. Are things going to change with, I think, the 425 increase of the teacher's contract before we get it?
No.
Or are we going to get it, and then we're going to have to deal with it, and then we have to go through another process?
I mean, yes, that is exactly what I would foresee, because we have a negotiated contract that was ratified by the board. The Common Council then has its statutory duty to do what they're going to do. Anything that would happen, I would imagine, and again, speaking as carefully as I can, would happen after we knew what that was. If we ratify the contract, the Common Council has its rights, and we'll pursue them in any way it chooses. After that, I will say that if the contract is ultimately not rejected, is the proper phrase to use for the Common Council, not rejected, then yes, that is when we would seek to engage in those discussions. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you very much for making this presentation tonight. I read the sign over here and it says it's all about the kids, but when I hear some of these numbers and where they're going, I really wonder, and as we have in the past, how much of this money is really getting and hitting the classroom, because it is all about the kids. But I have some questions. For instance, in this breakdown, you spoke in terms of this total salaries, somewhere around $73.5 million. But in fact, when we calculate salaries, typically salaries include workman's compensation and all the benefits that go with it. So it's really $96 million in total. But I was trying to figure out, again, you pointed to the workman's compensation. With the total salary increase, how do you wind up with a minus 20% on workman's compensation? Are they reclassifications?
No, they are not. The $1 million, which is the workers' comp appropriation for the current year, of the $1 million, our 2 to 3 year average is approximately $700,000 to $750,000. A GASB requirement, which is Government Accounting Standards Board requirement, that known as on Board of Education and on the municipality as well, is a requirement that both entities establish a reserve on the books and make an appropriate contribution on an annual basis. A few years back, the workers' compensation account was approximately $600,000. Over the past 2 to 3 years, the Board of Education, my recommendation, increased the value up to $1 million, knowing that we have now the responsibility, fiduciary responsibility to fund the reserve based on the new GASB requirement. Over the past 2 years, or during the inception of since the inception of the program, again, we funded approximately cumulative value of about $500,000. Going forward, I would like to support the addition of $250,000 to $300,000 to the reserve on an annual basis. We cannot afford to continue, at least in the short term, with an annual contribution of $250,000 to $300,000. But what we're looking at, the trade-off is jobs. So I would rather, this is a personal, this is as a finance professional, finance professional, education, I would rather face the music with the GASB requirement going forward and argue that the Board of Education has successfully funded the program since inception over the past 2 years and face the music on the contribution for year 3, next fiscal year, when on the other side of the table we're faced with further reductions in labor.
I think anything other than that would be borrowing money that you have to pay off in the future. So long term, and I think this financial meltdown that we're in is not just a spike, but something that's going to be with us for some time, at least 3 years, or to that extent. The other thing is, what portion of that increase is the administrative portion of it? How many real dollars and cents does that represent?
These are actual claims, labor claims.
No, I'm talking about the salaries, the $91 million.
Administrative salaries.
Administrative salaries. What portion of that is in administrative salaries?
I believe the administrator's union contract amounts for approximately $6 million. I'll have to recheck my numbers, but I believe it's about a $6 million cost in total. Yes.
So that's equal to the delta that you're faced.
That's total salary.
That's total salary.
We would have to eliminate all approximate 55 administrators that are hired or employed.
What is the increase?
The increase, I believe, the 4.51 settlement via arbitration, the arbitrated award of 4.41 came at a cost value of approximately $240,000 to $250,000.
Thank you. And I do have a comment at a time where I see many people around the country, the state as well, losing jobs. I think it was mentioned during the Obama inauguration that something like 11 million people are out of work right now. People are losing their homes. It doesn't look like this will be a spike that will go away in a minute. And what we're doing here now in somewhat gutting the educational system is a Band-Aid that next year will have to be probably a bigger cuts to compensate for what's happening now. There is no long-range plan for this when most economists tell us that we're going to be this way for at least 3 years. It's awful hard to, when I look at even some of the customers I have, I serve on the county council, but I own a business as well. When I see companies like Amphenol, who are on a 4-day week, they've agreed to do that, to share the burden rather than lay people off. Half of the crew, over 100 people, take a Monday off, the other half take a Friday off. When I see companies like Helicoil, who laid off all of their people prior to the holidays and brought back a skeleton crew of 27, I think it's somewhat unconscionable to see increases when people are losing their homes. I think that this board ought to direct their attention to talking to the union, become creative. Doesn't necessarily mean taking pay cuts, but maybe deferring those pay cuts to a time that we could better afford it without gutting our educational system. And I think that the administrators, I appreciate what Dr. Pasquarella has done, but I think all of the administrators ought to take the clue from our our superintendent and freeze their wages as well. And that saving should be held in advance until such a time as we as taxpayers can afford it. Because on the city side of the budget, it doesn't look any better. We have a huge loss in our pension fund, which will call for contribution as well. 25%, I believe, at least, which is going to cause a contribution to go into our operating budget. We have other costs and other revenue streams that are pretty well dried up, including real estate, which is a major one. So I don't know how we're going to be able to, with a clear conscience, vote in favor of people getting pay increases while other people are being laid off. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dosky. Dr. Pascarella, members of the board, Dr. Dosky, thank you. It's not that we don't appreciate the effort that you put forward to this. It's just that it's a strange time for all of us. We're all in that foreign territory here. I'd like to thank the 14 members of the council that took time out of their schedules tonight to come and be here for this important meeting and for the information that you're sharing with us tonight. A lot of my questions, a lot of my concerns have been asked by fellow council people and by members of the board, and I thank you for that. The one question I did have is, could you just elaborate a little bit more on furlough days and just give us a little bit of understanding of how many possible could you do? Is there state requirements? And the such to that.
By state law, we have to have a minimum of 180 student days, and that's what we have. So that 180 days is sacred, unless the law has changed to reduce that. And it can't just be a Danbury law; it'd be a law throughout for the entire state. Even if that happened, there's going to have to be discussions with unions and what have you, because they have a guaranteed amount of days within their contract. So the 180, we couldn't touch if we wanted to touch, but even if they're willing to touch it. The only days that are on for possible conversation would be what we call professional development days. And we have, there's a pre and post, but basically fourfold where we do professional development. Those days, if we were to close one of those days and not have it, and just keep the school closed, the estimated savings would be about $450,000 per furlough day. That's what that's talking about. And that's some of the considerations in the literature that different groups do.
Now, is there a union requirement for professional development days?
Yeah, I mean, let's say the board decided to do that. It cannot be done unilaterally. You'd have to enter conversations with the groups that are entitled to those days as guaranteed days. That's correct.
Thank you.
If there are no other further questions, I would like to thank everybody for attending this meeting. Council meeting. Public? I'm sorry. Mr. Murray, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bill Murray. I'm president of the Teachers Union. Some of you might think I'm brave to be here, others might think I'm foolish. I do appreciate all the concerns you have. The teachers have the same concerns also. I'm not just president of the Teachers Union, I'm also one of the 71 people that took the early retirement plan. I'm also a resident of Danbury. I'm a taxpayer in Danbury. And I have a very serious concern of where the educational system is going in Danbury. Last year, 14 teachers lost their jobs. So the number that were the 40 full-time equivalents that they're going to be dropping for next year are proposed, that's added to the 14 that have already been eliminated. The association recognizes the concern and the economy and everything else. And I will tell you personally, I'm not just a teacher, I'm also a member of the State Teachers Retirement Board. I have to answer questions about retirement. I'm also a member of the Investment Advisory Council that invests all the state money. And you have to answer questions about a couple $1 million. I have to answer questions about the loss of over $1 million this year. So I certainly appreciate the concern. The teachers, I guess I look back to how public education started, and it was the teachers and the students. That's how it started. We as teachers want to be convinced before we make cuts that everything is being done to see that the direct services to the students are still provided. I haven't been totally convinced, and I'm sure my membership hasn't been convinced of that either, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. We certainly recognize the problems with the economy and people losing their jobs and all those issues, but we just want to be convinced that everything is being done first before you start eliminating the direct contact of teachers with students. And I also want to comment the proposal of the teacher's contract that was approved by the Board of Ed. It sometimes appears that it looks like we're being a little selfish, that we're coming in a time when the economy is starting to even deteriorate more than it did a month or two ago. Danbury has made every effort possible to try to cut costs in every way we can. We spent over $50,000 of our own money to hire a consultant to work on the insurance plan, and our consultant has found what he proposes is almost $1 million difference in what Cigna has proposed and what they have told the school system the cost would be for next year. We will be making that proposal too. So I just want you to know we are certainly working on all the cost savings that we possibly can, and we are concerned with all of your concerns too.
Hello, good evening. My name is Karen Samuel. I'm a resident of Danbury. I also happen to be a high school math teacher, predominantly sophomores and juniors. I'd like to speak to what Bill said about connecting teachers with students. I'm quite concerned. I was a member of the NEASC steering committee, and I'm very well aware of some of the things that they suggested that we do. And I have had the opportunity to sit with some of the folks from Cambridge that are visiting the math department. I wondered, seeing that math is a shortage area in the state and the city, if you realize that at the high school we have 17 people on staff, we have 6 who have taken the retirement package. And I wondered, because math is a shortage area, if you could consider 100% replacement as opposed to 90%. I think it would give an opportunity for teachers to have more instructional time. Secondly, I know that at the elementary school level, the 9 math specialists have been instrumental in making that program successful. There is a very concise and very much working program there at the elementary school that feeds the middle school and therefore feeds the high school. The elementary schools have been able to make AYP with their assistance, and I wonder if you considered what the long-term effects will be if the student body coming from the elementary school feeding into the middle school, feeding to the high school, or perhaps not as prepared as they could be. I think it makes our role as high school teachers and educators a little bit more challenging. Regarding the coordinators, I understand that you want to move away from the model we've currently been using and move into a new leadership model. 2 things. One, I wondered, in using a leadership model, do you realize that you'll have teachers who'll be acting as leadership people throughout the district, helping each other and perhaps evaluating and supporting teachers, but that's less instructional time for them in the classroom. So while you have them working as part of your leadership team, you may in fact be losing, again, instructional time. Secondly, I have a question regarding the elimination of the current coordinators. if you follow the new model. I could be mistaken, but I do believe that for the coordinators who have retired, who have not been replaced, there was money somewhere that is paying them as paying them consultation fees. And I wondered if we were to eliminate the current coordinators, would that money still exist, and could that money better be spent on teacher positions?
Just overall, just the last comment about the structure. The board will look at it. We haven't made that public. So the cost that is being talked about, that was the money that was utilized this year to hire back the consultants in order to work with us in those departments. That money has been calculated in there as part of the 370 and has been accounted for, so it's used up. We did calculate that. So when the board looks at this, they will see how we blend the NEASC recommendations and the district needs. And I will put on the table with you after tonight's meeting. I talked to you, I share the concerns about the math. And I talked to you a little bit about the go-between the math and the other consideration was the kindergarten needs. And what I'm going to do after this meeting, and now that you have it, we're sending this home, by the way, to the faculty so that they have this tonight. Has that gone home yet to them yet?
It's good to go.
Okay, it'll go so that they have a chance to look at it, and I'll be meeting with the principals and others, and if they have some recommendations, I will bring to you when you have a workshop about what they might do, preferences they have, because now we have a better dialogue. Regarding any other comments about freezes and not freezes, I think there's a process we need to live up. Things have a life of their own. We're all cognizant of what it means. We have calculations of what it means if we have freezes. I think time and place for everything, and that may come someday for us to look at. But we need to work together to get there. So I think, we have a few weeks. If you have another meeting with the group here, we'll talk about it some more, and I'll bring that information back to the board. But what you see before you hear, the comment about it's all about kids, has been cruciating for us, because that's how we feel. There are cuts in here that are deep, and they couldn't, and I've said this before, everybody's trying to balance budgets on the backs of these kids. I met with the State Department, we've told them that, we met with the governor's staff, we keep telling them that this is not right. I have no other alternative after we look at what we need in our budget. If we can have some other savings, then so be it down the road, but we'll have to go through a process for it. So.
I just have one more question. There was a comment about that the union had some kind of cost savings in the insurance. This is the first I heard of something like that.
I'll have, there has been a conversation, and I'll let Elio talk about it.
It's been a conversation. I eagerly await the information. I've been working with the NEA and the administrators group. We had a tentative meeting scheduled approximately 2 weeks ago. There was a mishap with one of the insurance representatives. We've made every attempt to reschedule. We're working collectively together. We're working together to meet, I would hope, and project within the next week or so. And at that time, I usually await the union's position on the $1 million savings as they identify it in the area of insurance.
I don't want to bedraggle this because I want to go home too, but we're all in the same boat. I mean, the union, the city, the staff, the children are the ones that are going to feel the pinch. We're not here. I hear all kinds of suggestions that we don't cut here, we leave this, we leave that. I don't think anybody on this board, and I don't want to speak for the board, wants to come anywhere. I can speak for myself. I mean, I'm not looking forward to cutting math teachers or cutting any teachers or anybody. I just want to let you know that, personally, that I'm not here to cut anybody. If we have the money, we will do it. You show us where we can save money, where we can go. I'd be glad, I personally would love to see some suggestions from anybody.
On behalf of the board, I would like to thank Dr. Stout and all of his cabinet members for putting together this budget. Nobody wants to cut, nobody wants to reduce.
But I think that in the face of this economic downturn, if I might borrow your words, Mr. Levy, this financial meltdown that we're going through globally has turned that statement from a realism into an idealism. And unfortunately, during these times, pragmatism needs to overrule idealism. So I agree with Mr. Scozzafava, no one wants to cut, but unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to have choice this year or maybe for the next few years. I want to thank, if I haven't already, thank the council members for attending this evening. And I really feel that the only people that we need to apologize to for these cuts are the children of this community, because as Mr. Scozzafava said, they will indeed be feeling the impact. Thank you.
Just an added comment to Sue, I agree with her 100%. It's unfortunate that the children become the brunt of the misguidance and the greed of those who created this particular problem, and the damage that we're doing to the youth and those children that are going to be our future is unconscionable. But since we don't really have any other ways of doing things, this is one way that we're trying to alleviate the problem. As I said earlier, when we first started the meeting, this is probably the most difficult budget that's been put together in probably the last 10 or 15 years, if not in the history of the board. So, and I do agree with Mark that in order to get through this, we're going to have to work together collectively in order to make this in order to get through these hard times this year, next year, and hopefully or the year after if it goes that long. That being said, I'd like to thank you all.
Excuse me, I'd just like to ask a question before we end this meeting. Out of the retirement group of 6 to 7 teachers, when will we receive the information as to the identification of those people and where those people are in their subject matter?
We can actually send that to you tomorrow. We've created a spreadsheet that has it by subject matter, building, department, salary, everything. So we can email that to the board.
Thank you.
Well,
again, I'd like to thank everybody for participating this evening. That being said, we get a motion to adjourn this meeting. So moved. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Thank you.